Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for attending Laurier's Milton Lecture Series. This series runs the second Wednesday of the month, October to May at 7 p.m. If this is your first lecture of this series, welcome, and if not, welcome back. My name is Carolyn, and I work for Wilfrid Laurier University. We are so proud to be partners with the Milton Public Library on this incredible season. I think in our 12th year, actually. Some housekeeping for you all this evening. You've been muted on entry with videos turned off. We have time carved out for questions, and if you do have them, please use the Q&A function. The lecture is being recorded and will be shared via email in the coming days by the library. Before we begin the program this evening, we would like to acknowledge that Wilfrid Laurier University and its campuses are located on the Haldimand Tract, traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We recognize, honor, and respect these nations as the traditional stewards of the land and water on which Laurier is now present. Perhaps you're joining us from another location, and if that's the case, I would encourage you to take a moment to honor the Indigenous peoples who have lived and worked where you reside historically and presently. Acknowledging them reminds us of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work. This evening's topic, Fostering Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, Curating Resources to Support Educators, is hosted by Dr. Ava Speak, Callista Meja Torres, and Rennie Taliankik. Dr. Ava Speak is an assistant professor in the Faculty of Education at Wilfrid Laurier University. Her areas of research include student international mindfulness, refugee education, teacher training in diverse global contexts, and STEM pedagogies. She teaches several courses in Laurier's BA International Education Studies. Prior to joining academia, she was an educator in schools and development projects in Nunavut, Africa, Asia, and Europe. Callista is a second-year junior intermediate teacher candidate at Wilfrid Laurier University. She became a member of the EDI and I Coalition due to this project. She has worked at camps and continues to work as a private tutor for various age groups. Callista understands the importance of an equitable, inclusive, and diverse mindset in our world. Rennie is a second-year Bachelor of Education student at Laurier in the Junior Intermediate program. She's a member of the EDI and I Coalition at Laurier as well. She has taught science and making in museums and after-school programs in the San Francisco Bay Area for many years, where she started her learning journey into issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Thank you to the three of you for joining us this evening. We're very much looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Welcome, I'm Rennie Taliankik, and I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Okay, and I'm going to move this out of the way. There we go. Now can I check? Can you see the part that I'm trying to show you? Oh, good. I got a thumbs up from Avis. Lovely. Oh, lovely. Okay. Now I get to see everybody and I can see my slideshow at the same time. Fantastic. All right. So we're on an EDI and I journey into equity, diversity, and inclusion and indigenization. And this is about curating resources to support educators. And today is November 10th, 2021, which is also very exciting. All right. Our journey. Today, this is just a quick roadmap into what we're doing, what brought us here. I'm gonna be talking about what brought us here. Then you'll be hearing from Callista, who's gonna tell us where have we been. And then finally, we'll finish with Ava Speak, telling us where do we hope to go from there. So we're excited to share this journey with you. And we're so glad you came tonight to hear a little bit more about this. So what brought us here? This journey for us started in the summer of 2020 This is a photo from downtown Kitchener-Waterloo, where I reside as a settler. And in the summer of 2020, most of us were home trying to escape COVID-19 and to stay safe. And despite that, we had a lot of people coming out wearing masks, you can tell in this little picture, to protest Black Lives Matter, because so much was happening systemically, violence and discrimination against racialized people, both here in Canada and the United States. And so people were working to fight back. Now, we started at Laurier that summer. I was starting in the fall. Callista also started in the fall in the teacher education program. Ava Speak had started at Laurier a little bit earlier in the summer. Dr. Artavan Ayazadarad had started in January of that year, and Maria Cantillini-Williams had started as dean that year as well. So 2020, all these new people are coming to Laurier. And we decided we also wanted to make change within the Laurier community, and we were going to fight back. And so we started working together to do that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Indigenization Coalition. It started within the Faculty of Education, but we wanted to acknowledge that we did not just do this ourselves. This was a partnership of many people at Laurier, including the greater Faculty of Education, the Office of Indigenous Initiatives, the Center for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at Laurier, so bigger than us, library services at Laurier, and the web services team. So a lot of people were spending their time to make this happen. So the beginning of our school year in 2021, so this is about September 2020, the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Indigenization Coalition within the Faculty of Education was started. And we did not just want to be another committee that would sit around and talk. We were there, and this was sort of all brought together by Artavan and Maria. And we really want to disrupt, question, advocate, and create change. And the mission, the greater mission of this coalition is that we want to do all these things through dialogue, collaborations, partnerships, events, and resources to advance the work of equity, diversity, inclusion, and indigenization as a collective within the Faculty of Education and in the larger community. So doing events like this is exactly what we wanted to be doing. Yay, we're making change. So we started small. We started with, we did a little event on Zoom for the Faculty of Education. We did another one with the broader Laurier community where we had a filmmaker come and he shared his film, and then we had a discussion with him afterwards, which was fantastic. And then we also started working within the Faculty of Education to change this lesson plan template that all Bachelor of Education students have to use. And part of it was we wanted them, all these new candidates within the Faculty of Education, to be asking themselves questions about their lessons that they're teaching. Are they including equity, diversity, and inclusion within their lessons? And so the questions that our coalition pushed to get onto this new lesson template, I'm going to share with you, because these questions are great for just questioning your own work. And if even, and I use work in a much broader context here. I don't mean necessarily stuff that you do that you get paid for, but how you're spending your time each day. That is work. And so with that, I'm going to share these questions for you. Okay, so the first question: what steps have you taken to ensure this lesson is socioculturally sustaining and accessible to all? And this one you can reword for yourself. What steps have you taken to ensure your work is socio-culturally sustaining and accessible to all? And what does socio-culturally sustaining mean? You might not know, and that's fine. But basically, it's what social and cultural factors have you included that sustain people who are outside your social group and outside your culture group? So how are you sustaining them and helping them get to be their best selves and be themselves and exist within your world? And how are we helping them do that? The next question is, how have you examined or aware of biases or blind spots related to your personal identity and or your positionality? Now, this question is, when we were working on this database that we came up with, this website that we're sort of working towards right now, when we were trying to answer these questions, it turned out that we had some blind spots that we missed. Like, even though we were trying to do this work, and I've been working in this field for a while, and so has Avis and Callista, we would still miss things. And someone would say, well, have you thought about this? And we'd be like, oh, no, we haven't. Oh, okay. So I just want to acknowledge finding your blind spots can be hard, because you would be doing the work if you knew about it. So that's why we ask friends and we build relationships. Now, in what ways does your lesson or your work, in your case, ensure that marginalized voices and identities are included and empowered? So again, when we do our lessons, are we reflecting the people that we work with? Are we reflecting the different cultures that live here in Canada and in Southern Ontario where you are? And how are we not just including them, but also empowering them? And then finally, so this was our question for the teacher candidates, how do the lesson resources reflect the diverse global world in which we live? And again, so for you, your work, whatever that is, how are we including not just Canada and all the different people who live here, but how are we really reflecting the diversity of the globe, especially because we're all so connected these days, and the beauty of all that connection, and how are we making sure that people are learning about not just themselves and their little world, but how are we opening them up to that greater bubble, which is also a lovely thing to think about. All right, so this is like the team. This is our team photo. So we realized that we wanted to add these questions that I just asked you to our lesson plan template. However, not all our teacher candidates coming into the program, freshly into the program, necessarily felt confident that they were like able to just sit down and rattle off an answer to all 4 of those questions and know exactly where to go on the internet to find some resources to do that and to find the beautiful pictures and all of that. So we wanted to support them as a coalition so that if they were feeling a little nervous about answering those questions and finding out about their blind spots or reflecting the diverse cultures that they see around them, how do we help them find some resources as a teacher that they could use? And so that was another thing that came out of this. So because we wanted to ask the teacher candidates these questions, we realized we also need to support them, giving them a place to start their journey of finding the answers to those questions. So we, at the Faculty of Education and the Coalition, Ava stepped up and said, well, I can lead something called an alternative placement. So that is an education experience outside of my junior intermediate learnings that I will be qualified in afterwards. I'm supposed to, as part of my teacher candidacy, step outside that and experience education in a different way. And because it was COVID, this was perfect. I could do this from my computer at my home. So what we started was Callista and I We're going to spend 2 weeks each, and we were going to come up with a database of resources that would help teacher candidates and educators who want to be able to answer those 4 questions I just went over. And we were going to do it. That was going to be at 40 hours, and we were going to have a database, and it would be lovely. And I can tell you, we're still working on our database. So something happened, and you're going to find out more from Callista now. So I'm going to pass it on to Callista.
Thank you, Penny. If you want to do the next slide. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about our journey. So part of our alternative placement, Brandy and I were, under the supervision of Ava's, created a website for a resource bank for educators to start their EDI journey onto. So I'm going to talk about where we have been with this project. Next slide. Okay, perfect. So this is the final product of our website that's launched and fully available for you to look at. And I'll be going through how we got to this final product. Next slide. So the resources we have categorized on our website are separated into self-growth and in the classroom resources. Our self-growth resources are dedicated to those educators who would like to learn more about equity, diversity, inclusion, and indigenization resources themselves, as some of us may want to expand on our own EDI and I knowledge before we try to incorporate that within a classroom. I will talk further about the subcategories we have in our self-growth section later in the presentation. Next slide. Okay. So in the classroom resources was the second of the 2 main categories we have organized our resources into. This category specifically contains the EDI and I resources for classroom lessons. And again, we have these resources further categorized into suggested grade levels and our 5 main categories, which again, I will talk about later in the presentation. So at first, we were quite overwhelmed at how many resources there were out there with a range of topics, and we would often research topics by just Googling EDI. So when we started out, yes, that was EDI was the keyword we used for our research. However, EDI is a giant topic, and our master list of resources that we're using to keep track of all of it became very unorganized. We needed a structure to help us organize our research. We started categorizing our resources with specific topics, such as where they talk about racism, identity, and since this project came after the Black Lives Matter protests, we realized a lot of our resources fell in this category. We knew when we started this project that our audience for our website would be educators who would be looking at this website to help on their own EDI and I journey, or bring EDI and I resources to their classrooms. That's when I realized we were lacking on certain resources such as indigenization, disability, LGBTQ plus resources. And we understood that since EDI was so large, we could not put every single EDI and I resource onto our website, but we want our resources to be diverse enough in topic so our audience would have a well-defined starting point. And thankfully, since we started categorizing our resources in terms of their topic, we realized which topics we were underrepresenting on our website. And since we desire for this website to be a living document, there of course will be future curators down the line who may add or remove resources over the years. However, the process of vetting never stops. When we're vetting each resource for the website, we want to acknowledge which resources had authors and illustrators with lived experience and highlight that in the brief summary underneath each resource. And this helps our audience to further differentiate which resource they would like to further examine and which resources they would not. Through our time researching, we realized we gathered resources that were not very current and some in the past year. However, the word current could mean anything, we needed a clear definition of what was considered current and what was not. Our benchmark was anything older than 2015 would not be considered current enough for the website. So we want to put on our website resources that would be available for free membership on the host platform. And as a team, we desire for the website's resources to be equitable for all of our audience. Also realized that many of our resources either fell into the category of celebrating identity and or addressing different isms. This includes sexism, racism, heterosexism, and the list goes on. We found some resources came from we also want our resources to be local to the KW and in general Ontario region, since we found many of our resources came from British Columbia or Saskatchewan or even outside of Canada. And lastly, before the website became public, we needed help of experts in their field and ask for their advice. We wanted the resources we put on our website to bring out the proper message rather than resources that were simply trying to save a culture rather than celebrate it. Here we have two local to KW region resources. One of them is Bring on the Sunshine, and the goal is to bring people together to celebrate people of African descent here in Canada. They also launched a summer camp based on African value system. And Unlearn is the other local organization, and their goal is to challenge individuals to think about their unconscious bias as you never stop unlearning your own biases. So, as I said earlier in the presentation, I would further break down these categories. So when we looked at the resources once more, we realized our resources not only fall into self-growth or in the classroom. Some resources celebrate identity, some focus on indigenization, some addressed and took on the social justice aspect of fighting against discriminations. And in our self-growth section, the category of creating a brave space was a popular theme for many of the resources, and not very popular for the resources we collected for in the classroom. Now, creating a brave space means creating a safe space for people where respect is a necessity. In our classroom resources, a popular theme for these combine many of the topics of celebrating identity, indigenization, and anti-discrimination. These resources seem to be doing so much in a single resource that we decided to store it under the label Diversifying Knowledge. I believe Avis will take over from here.
Okay, am I unmuted now? Okay, so where do we hope to go next? What's really important to us? Yeah, Rennie, could you back up one spot? Sorry, thank you. What's really important to us is that we get this message out there and we share and communicate. And I think this metaphor of a journey really is quite accurate, that we really are working our way through this, and the journey is far from complete. Full disclosure, before I say anything further, I want to point out that Rennie and Callista truly are the brains, the muscle, and the heart of the operation. I think they've done a wonderful job this evening presenting their project, but also they've shown tremendous dedication over the last 8 months we've been working together. I found them very inspiring, and I really look forward to see where we are going to be going next together. Okay, so go ahead, Rennie, you can jump ahead one more slide now. So I thought this is not an empirical view at all of our work, yet I think it is, again, a nice metaphor to show that this kind of work, when you're looking at issues of social justice, of anti-racism, of decolonization, I'm going to use the word that Dr. Artavan Izadarad, my colleague, who is the person who began our EDI and I coalition, he uses the word messy. And it really is messy work. We started out moving forward, making great strides, and then we met with challenges and changes of direction. And that's okay. We've tried to really embrace that messiness. The idea is that it's always a positive slope. We're always moving forward and upward. Over time, we continue to grow, even though at times it can get a little bit on the messy side. So I'm just going to circle back a little bit to where Rennie started our talk this evening. And she was talking about these questions that were posed to our teacher candidates in the lesson planning process. And lesson planning really is the crux of what we do as educators. It's all the instructional decisions and all those teacher moves that we make to communicate our curriculum, to go through a process of instructing students, but also applying different pedagogical theories. And to sort of summarize those points that Rennie raised with those 4 questions, I've just sort of condensed them a little bit. And the idea is these condensed points will help us kind of see where our next steps are going. So this idea about culturally sustaining and accessible experiences in schools is very important. The idea of assessing and recognizing our biases and blind spots, and then really looking at marginalized people, looking at ways we can include and empower them, but in a way that really reflects the diversity, not only of our community, but of our world. And as I said, I think these points really do reflect where we hope to go next on our journey. So this idea of being culturally sustaining, Rennie did a nice job summarizing how that applies to our project and how you might use that concept in your own trajectory of learning with regards to EDI and I. It's important to note that when we talk about culturally sustaining, we're talking about, of course, having high expectations for all our students. But in this case, we're also really looking at that community connection, that students should be able to see themselves and their community in their school experience. So this means really centering instruction on the cultures, the languages, the ways of being, the lived experiences of our students. And what happens when this is done well, this creates this reciprocal and trusting relationship between school and community. If you are familiar with the work of Geneva Gay or Django Paris, Gloria Ladson-Billings, you'll recognize these ideas from culturally sustaining pedagogy. Now, what's important is our journey is far from over, and we really want to continue to bring together resources that reflect the community. We're looking to really include issues regarding race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, disability, and all the beautiful diversity of our community. So to continue our journey, this is where we really would hope that we can have your input as audience members, that you're willing to help us strengthen these connections and you're able to reach out and share experiences, resources, and feedback. So a little bit later, we do have a website, an email that you can send messages to us about your own experiences. And if you're willing, we would very much welcome that participation to strengthen that community connection that we're trying to work towards. So another point that Rennie had raised at the beginning that we're looking at doing is trying to acknowledge bias and really recognize those blind spots. And how we do this is really through critical reflection and really engaging in an interactive way, but in a very authentic way, having opportunities to work with diverse communities, to experience that otherness and really lean in to that discomfort that may come from not having maybe assessed bias or blind spots in the past. Really being willing to examine privilege. And I think all of this can happen in different ways. But one thing that our faculty is very much committed to is experiential learning and really creating opportunities for students in the faculty, as well as our faculty members, to really have that opportunity to work in diverse contexts. I've included here a article, and I'm just going to pop the link into the chat because it's a really interesting article by a teacher educator in the United States who has taken that idea of experiential learning, of diverse, sorry, my chat's not, I'm just going to try that one more time. I have to get the right, one more second. Sorry. There we go. So what he's done is he's taken this idea of experiential learning and that exposure to diverse communities, and he's shown how that can really help students recognize those biases and as he's put, as you can see in the title of the article, root them out. So I've included that, just another resource that I think might be of interest if you are looking at that idea of bias and recognizing that. Thank you. Okay, so the last area that Rennie had touched on when she was talking about those questions, and I think also Callista made a really nice summary of what we have available on our website, is this idea to include and empower those who may be marginalized to really reflect the diversity that we have not only in our community, but in the world. And in order to do this, we've really, as a coalition, the EDI and I coalition is really focused on action and agency, if you will. And I think that the resource in bringing it together has really helped us see that we are, as much as possible, trying to bring together digital resources, but also really getting, like I said, that experiential, active role in our community. So as another just interesting application of this, I'm going to share in the chat a tool that has come from the school district in the Halton district. And I'll just pop that in the chat. And this tool is a really interesting approach to looking at ways that we can really draw in those marginalized groups, but also acknowledge that there are issues with things like discriminatory language. So this is one very active tool that we came across that I think really models the kinds of things we're hoping to do, to really continue this work with digital resources, but as much as possible incorporate community action groups, looking at face-to-face events, workshops, activities. And we're hoping that that can be sort of the next phase as we continue through. I also noticed in the chat at the beginning of our talk this evening, someone had mentioned, had asked if there's many resources in French. And there are some, but not a great number. And I think, again, that's another excellent piece of advice that we can start working towards, really creating that sense of agency in our community. So I'm just going to try to summarize a little bit of what we've talked about this evening. It's been kind of this journey metaphor that's been in 3 parts. Rennie talked about the social political movements that compelled not only the beginning of the EDI and I coalition, but also this sense of a desire to make change, not only in our faculty, but within the university and our community. So when we did this idea of adopting an inquiry stance, being willing to ask questions, and importantly, to reflect often. Then Callista, she took some time to describe our process and the steps we went through to pull together these great resources. And the process really, we've learned, definitely takes time. If there's a lesson that we would take away from this, it's never a linear process. Like I said, it can get messy. And one thing that we found, we so appreciated the work that the different vetters, the different experts had contributed to looking at the resources and thinking critically if they were appropriate for our purposes. Asking for help is essential. And then finally, as we move along this trajectory, as we move forward and we look at the kinds of things we'd like to do in terms of not only improving the quality of resources, but extending our reach and including community members, and also really looking at ways that we can create that sense of agency. One thing I think that we have learned is that we need to really listen, both with intention, but also this idea, having a willingness to learn, but also to unlearn. So I'm just checking my time. I think our time's gone quite nicely. Before I finish off right now, I'd just like to thank a couple of different, actually maybe a few different groups that have been really helpful. We really appreciate the support of the Milton Public Library and giving us this opportunity to talk about our project. And I think that Maria Patrico as the branches manager has been super, helping us navigate the technology this evening. Carolyn Hawthorne from the Laurier Office of Research Services has been indispensable, again, helping us prepare for this evening and promote it. And then we've had such great support from our dean, Dr. Maria Cantillini Williams, from Dr. Artavan Izadarad, who is the founder of our EDI and I Coalition, and all the members of the coalition. The Office of Indigenous Initiatives, the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion have also been really indispensable in this entire process. So we really appreciate the support, and we hope, as the graphic says, this will continue and that we can spread and branch out. Just to let you know, we have used a lot of images in this set, in this slide set, and the next slide, I know it's probably not of great super interest, but they are acknowledged on the next slide. And then I've got on the following slide, Rennie, if you don't mind just jumping ahead one more, we have our email of the coalition. So we'd love for people to stay in touch, to take time to consider their own experiences and how you might be able to contribute to our work, both these digital resources, but also really opening up to more interactive face-to-face things as COVID regulations hopefully continue to go a little bit more relaxed. So here's our email. We'd love to hear from you with suggestions, resources, or just discussion of your own experiences. We'd be really interested in learning more. Okay, I think even I'll share that email address in the chat, but maybe we can pop ahead one more slide, and we can look for any kinds of questions that people might have to share at this point. I think maybe all of us could be unmuted. Yeah, super. Oh, I'm not sure about this. Ask a question. Can the echo be improved? Sorry, I didn't see this until now. How bad is the echo?
It was pretty echoey, but we're doing okay now.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
Oh no, we were able to figure it out at the end. Thank you all so much for this amazing roadmap you've provided us with, and I'm looking forward to seeing the next steps into this process. And if anyone my name is Maria Patrico, and we're so happy to host you here this evening. So if anyone does have any questions, we would love to get a chance for you three to be able to answer them. I know EDI is top of mind in many organizations, and you've really provided some incredible resources. So thank you for Milton Public, on behalf of Milton Public Library, because I know we'll definitely be taking advantage of them with our staffing and our programming. There's a question. Are there any resources on holistic lifelong learning on the website?
Yes, there is.
Explore.
Do you want to describe? Can you remember off the top of your head, Callista?
I can't remember the top of my head. Rennie, do you remember which resource in particular?
It's definitely in self-growth. So the first big section is self-growth, and that those resources can very much work for your growth just in general around EDI and I. Yeah. That's
great. Before you started your presentation, my question was going to be like, where do you start? But you answered that question so well. So I'll just give one more minute to see if, for a few seconds, if anyone else has anything they would like to. Oh, I see the questions start to populate slowly. When doing equity work, it can sometimes be exhausting due to all the pushback you get. What were some of your coping mechanisms and strategies to overcome such challenges? And that can be to any of you.
Well, I can jump in. I know that one thing that we put a lot of time into is asking for support from people who had different kinds of expert knowledge. to help us vet the resources. We knew if this was going to be a public-facing website, we needed to have a lot of things covered. And I think, Callista, you mentioned not only the currency, but the authorship, if there was an illustrator, who hosts the resource. And we needed support with that because we don't have all the answers. Far from that. We really relied heavily on these outside experts. Rennie and Callista, is there anything that you would add to that?
I would say that we did, if we were able to find resources that did have authors and illustrators with lived experiences, we highlighted that on the website, as I said in the presentation. And just to help our audience gauge what resources they would not want to touch, we also did try to gauge, like, this person is not is not known to have lived these experiences. So then you're able to pick if you would like an authentic voice or another voice, but maybe not totally up to you, maybe not honor as much, or however your approach is to it. So it was, as Eva said, it was quite tough. And as Randy and I were going through this, I remember us talking a lot, like, can we include this? Are we able to include this? Just because we knew it was going to be public, we knew it was going to have our names on it, Laurier's name on it, and we did not want to create any backlash. So we tried as much as possible to tread lightly, but also try to, no, these topics are important. Let's bring them out onto the public and be like, these resources are important to look at. Take the time. This could start your EDI and I journey.
And I would just add, yeah, you might think like, oh, there won't be any pushback. Like, what could they push back about? And there you will find there will be pushback. And to know that, like, it's not just you. It's like everyone's got a different lens that they view this through. And so some of the pushback can just be that they're approaching the problem differently. And so when you do get pushback, I would say it's important to really have a conversation with whoever is pushing back or whatever organization is pushing back and really find out what is driving that, because oftentimes it can lead to some really interesting questions and conversations that can help you figure out how you both can move forward. And then also, it's really important to know no one's perfect, right? And we're all human and we're all doing this. And if we don't try, then we definitely won't improve, right? But I know people can get really, really scared of making a mistake. And I totally get that because I was there. I probably spent at least 5 years just being terrified of making mistakes. And when I finally allowed myself to try and to do this and to just tell myself, yeah, you're gonna make a mistake, and you know what? At least you tried, and maybe you make a mistake, but then you still get to move forward from that, is just a really important thing to hold and to be gentle with yourself around. Like, it's okay to make a mistake. So I just wanted to let you know that.
It's messy.
Very messy.
Thank you so much. Okay. There is one here. Are there any ways one can get involved in your work? For example, an initiative or event?
Well, we do always look for members to join our EDI and I coalition. And if you're interested, Rochelle, you can drop an email to any of us, or Artaban Izadarad, who I think is here this evening, who's our chair of the coalition. If you're interested in the resource work, again, that email that I shared a little bit earlier, we definitely would always welcome support for doing the research and, again, vetting and looking to expand into more sort of face-to-face things as the COVID regulations allow. So please be in touch. We welcome any further involvement by anyone this evening.
And we'll share.
And then, can I just add?
Yes.
I know sometimes the EDI and I Coalition puts on events, like larger events. And last year we were advertising those through the Faculty of Education Twitter feed, as well as like our personal channels. So that was another way. If there's a bigger event, because I know right now we're trying to work on one. The coalition is working still. So yeah.
And that's open to people outside of Laurier as well?
When we advertise it on the Faculty of Education Twitter, it's for an event that's greater, like larger community for sure. Yeah.
Do you track usage of your resources?
I think we can. When web services helped us set up, we can monitor the number of hits. I'm not sure about individual, like if we can track actually individually, but that's an excellent point. I know we had intended to track it a little bit. I'm going to make a note to circle back on that one. Callista or Rennie, I don't think we've gotten, we don't know how to use
we have access to it. I remember web services saying that we could,
Mm-hmm.
but it would be quite messy because we don't have all the access web service.
Mm-hmm.
The web service employees do.
Right. Nope. Noted. Thank you for that.
Extra work for you.
And I see Artavan put in the chat. I forgotten this. Laurier's EDI and I Coalition does have its own Instagram account, so you can also follow us on Instagram. So look in the chat for our handle.
Excellent. That looks like all the questions from people who are here this evening. And Carolyn is also sharing the Faculty of Education Twitter account for Laurier Education. And anyone who is registered for the Laurier Milton Lecture Series newsletter, these links will all be included in an email that will be forthcoming in the next week. Anyone who is not registered, you can do so on the Milton Public Library website at beinspired.ca. And so I'd like to say on behalf of Wilfrid Laurier University, Milton Public Library, thank you, Avis, Rennie, and Callista for sharing your knowledge, expertise, and incredible resources with us this evening. Thank you everyone who attended this evening's lecture, and a copy of tonight's lecture will be shared on the Milton Public Library website in the next few days, as well as on YouTube. And please be sure to register for our next lecture on December 8th. Thanks to all of you. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.